What's up, Evan? I'm just doing the...
Yeah, I was just going to see like coming in. All right, yeah, we're ready to go. We're live.
All right, you guys. Welcome to actually Friday Night Live on Sunday. So it's like a Sunday Night Live because we're just... it's a little quieter here at the studio for shooting on the weekend. So we just started our fall term, and Friday nights get a little crazy. So we decided to move it on to Sunday. So hopefully it's not bugging too many of you guys. But this will be the end of Inktober for us. So I hope you guys enjoyed the whole month of watching us do these demos. Eric, Doug coming in, nice enough for those guys to come in and show you a little bit about what they do. I've of course been working on this piece that I've done partially for the online phase 3, but also for you guys. I did a little bit of it about a month ago, the beginning of the month, to actually show you a little bit more of this Solomon J. Solomon. I actually did Samson in the middle, as you guys remember. But this is the piece. This is where I'm at in it. You can see how complicated this background's getting. This is one of the harder parts because in this piece, there's just so much what my dad would call coleslaw, which is like rendering stuff that really isn't anything and trying to make it look like something. So I'm trying to come up with a creative way to fill in this background where it's interesting but not too interesting, but also is a foil object for my figures. I haven't got the left side. I'm going to try to finish this before. My goal was Inktober. I was to get this done just because I don't think I'll ever finish it otherwise. And it was just kind of a pet project, a fun thing to show you guys. And but it's cool. It's got some beautiful stuff in it, I think. There's some Wrightson influence back here, a little bit of Booth, some other different influences coming in. Really just having fun with it. Didn't have the greatest reproduction. The best reproduction I could find on the internet of this painting. I couldn't tell what was happening with these two guys in the background. Found a better one finally and realized there's a whole back here and a foot that I'm missing that you couldn't see in the other reference that I had. So kind of funny as you see better repros of it, like, oh shit, I was kind of guessing at what was in certain areas. Sometimes I was very close. Sometimes I was quite far off because I was just basically inventing stuff. But if you zoom in really close, you can see the cross-hatching and the lattice work back here it's kind of just a free-form exploration of knitted together, kind of allowing your strokes to kind of hold together and kind of grip each other, almost like a wood carving or a wood cut. It's definitely an interpretation. I don't just want to flat black these areas. I think it would look really bad. So I need to create some kind of moire pattern, some kind of cross-contouring pattern that looks dark but has a little bit of breath in it. So I'm just showing you this. I'm not going to work on this one today. I'm going to work on a little dark crystal piece because I've been kind of watching that new dark crystal. I grew up with the dark crystal. I mean, I was like a little kid when it came out, kind of right about the same time as Star Wars, I think. And it was kind of influential on me. And I remember sketching it a lot as a kid. And I tried to find this little ink I did when I was 5 years old of one of the characters that I'm going to be inking today. It's actually the same one. And I couldn't find the damn thing. So I was really disappointed because I really wanted to show you that because it was kind of cool. It was done with like a Sharpie, but it was quite nice. And I mean, I was just literally 5 years old. So just stuff to remind you and show you kind of where I'm coming from. But this is one I'm going to finish up, hopefully, and I'll post it on my Instagram. So keep an eye out for it. I hope you guys have been enjoying also the Inspirational Inkers sequence that we did. It was kind of like a little 5-10 minute blurb on Wrightson, on Booth, on Frazetta that Doug and I did. So that's on our Instagram, but it's also on our, I believe it's on our YouTube. So you can kind of check out some of those things if you want to know a little bit more about the inkers that inspire me, why they inspire me, and just a little quick insight into that. So anyway, this is the one I'm working on at home. Thank you. And then this is the one I'm going to do today. It's just a cool little, little guy. You can see the pencil's pretty nice. If we zoom in, Andrew, on these areas like down in here, you can see the cross contouring with my click pencil that I put in to really show where my guidelines are with my ink. So I'll probably be inking this with a brush, maybe some quill. I was thinking of doing it in all three, ballpoint pen, quill, and brush. I was also thinking of doing it in brown sepia ink, which would mess things up a little bit because I don't have a brush pen that is in sepia. I only have it in black. So I'm kind of debating whether I should just go black. I just am tired of I like to mix around and mess around with things. If I do it the other way, it's going to be a little more old school with brushes. Like these guys. So again, the Winsor Newton Series 7, the Raphaels, the Maestros. So let's try this and see. This is just me playing around with you guys and having some fun. So again, I dip it in the ink, and I'm cold, right? I haven't inked today. So I'm going to go in, not in the head, but I'm going to go into like an area that I can mess up in, and just say, if I mess up down in the hair, or if I mess up a little bit in some of the drapery, is anyone really going to be able to notice? Probably not. Now the hair has a really complex layering on these old elders, these old spiritual, kind of, they're the good guys in the Dark Crystal, if you haven't seen the Dark Crystal, and they're kind of this, they're just, I think they're really cool. I've always kind of resonated with them, and kind of that Yoda kind of feel to them, but just a really cool character design. And Brian Froud's awesome. I've always liked his work. I used to do little sketches from it. I like, Paul Bonner's work, and, guys that are kind of influenced by Froud. And just the kind of cool stuff, the, Lord of the Rings, grew up with all that stuff. So it's a very fertile area to explore. Now, with these brush, the more delicate your hand is, obviously, the better. If you've got a squirrely hand, meaning your hand shakes a lot or you do a lot of caffeine, this is going to be a nightmare, this stuff, right? So what we want to do is pressure sensitivity, pushing and pulling the form. I prefer the brush because I feel like it can do everything the quill can do, but better. Doesn't score my paper. The quill is handy for certain looks, like really scratchy looking calligraphy. And sometimes I do want that. I found that, now notice like I'm barely touching the tip. And notice how I choke up and I hold the brush very securely, and I just push and pull, allowing it to open, contract, and expand, and give me a thicker or thinner line weight. Now it's sometimes hard, like most of my line weight right now, I'm not doing thick, thin, like push, pull, push, pull to go in and out of thick to thin. That gets even a little bit more challenging and requires even a little bit better dexterity. Most people won't even know unless you were to tell them that you weren't doing that, or a very acute, sensitive eye to inking that knows the difference between a Booth and a Cole and a Frazetta and a Gibson could probably say, oh yeah, he's not pushing and pulling his line weight, he's pulling it only in one thickness. Like there, I could have, in this little tiny pattern right here, I could have gone thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thin, and got a little bit more variation out of the calligraphy that I was using to indicate these little folds. Because basically what he's got on these sleeves of probably leather or some kind of hide of some sort that is kind of underneath this more padding embroidery type thing. The hardest part of this hair right here, and I'll do sections of it, I don't know if I'll do the whole thing, is going to be one of the more challenging, tedious aspects of this particular piece. Now notice I'm pulling towards me right now, which I don't normally do. I'm putting a little bit of tone on the tip of the finger to just make it look like it has more complexion. Then it drops into shadow between the fingers right here. I could dilute down my ink and paint it in more like a watercolor and just fill that in with like a diluted ink to give it a little bit of reflected light. That's one option. What I chose to do is more the line orientation that I'm doing elsewhere just to stay consistent. But let's say I wanted to do this one the way I was just mentioning. I would take a little water, and I have a little mixing area that looks something like this, right? Just a little Japanese kind of ceramic dish I got years ago at some local, it was like Pier 1 Imports or something, And see, I put this in just as a diluted watercolor. And I might do that in the shadow areas, maybe leave a little bit of white coming through just like you do in a watercolor just for fun. And just let that kind of dry. So I'm again putting it in as a diluted wash. Now you can use diluted ink to make something look further back, to push something into the shadows, to allow a little breathing room in the shadows, just like you do in oil paint, just like you do in gouache. You can use stains. Frazetta does it very, very effectively, and one of the better guys at it. And there's other artists that choose to only use cross contouring to get their illusions of depth and don't use diluted ink. And that's just really a personal preference, in my opinion. It's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's just, here's one person doing it this way and it looks really cool, and here's another person doing it this way and it looks really cool. And so I think more importantly is we're going for an aesthetic, meaning we want it to look nice. Why not? Because everything that we filter through as artists really has an aesthetic quality to it, or should. And I think that means it should look good. Because every time I've worked for any clients, they never say, hey, give me a really ugly thing, you know, make it really ugly and we'll pay you a lot of money for it. They're always like, can you do this really nice? Can you present? And it's almost a given. It's not even really spoken. It's like, we're assuming you're going to give us a really nice looking product, whether that's a car design, whether that's a costume design, whether that's a background painting, whether that's a character or creature design. Well, I don't care what it is. Prerequisite has to look cool, especially in, you know, Western capitalistic, you know, society where we're selling everything. You know, things need to be attractive. You go to Star Wars, you know, at Disneyland, and everything is beautifully designed in that theme park. I just went recently, and it's just amazing the attention to detail on everything. So, you know, I don't know how many creatives worked to bring that to fruition, but it had to be a ton, you know, in Imagineering and all that. And they're sitting there and they're figuring out what this doorknob's going to look like on the toilet, and what you know, I mean, everything's got to be figured out, right? Nothing is, oh, I accidentally just going to design that, or we're just going to throw that on. No, it's got to be fit in context. It's got to be awesome. It's got to look good. And that's everything in that park, down to the drinks they're serving in the cantina, to the, you know, to whatever. I mean, it's crazy. And so as artists, you know, even when we're learning to do things like this ink, we're putting it through a filter that it needs to look good. You know, it needs to be fun to look at. And now we can do that through any number of cross contouring, any number of tools. Since we're working with really traditional inking here, we're primarily working with quill, brush, and ballpoint pen. And those are the biggies. And those are the ones that, if you were to look back throughout history of inking, those are the ones that really carry the weight. You know, there's digital inking now too. I think with the stylus getting better, you'll probably be more apt to be able to pull stuff kind of like what we're doing, but it's still probably going to be a bit of a far cry away from the tactile sensitivity that one can get with these tools on this surface. So there's the little hand with some of the embroidery stuff that's happening. If I want to separate the hand from the actual drapery, again, I can dilute down this ink, this brown ink, quite substantially, and just go in and watercolor it in with this ink around these little pieces of leather, strands and straps and just drapery, and kind of, again, sprinkle it into, even over the top of some of my line work. And I can basically get a faux version of a little watercolor, and I could do subsequent stains to give the illusion of these little raised pieces of leather rolling and all kinds of fun stuff. If I really wanted to nerd out on it, I could leave a little bit of a highlight along the top of them as I'm going along, skirting along, and I can do it that way. That's still inking. And a lot of people say, well, that's not really, I mean, inking can be done a lot of different ways. There's so many little cool techniques. Now let's go into the hair a little bit, and the head, and do some fun stuff there. So I look at how the hair kind of goes in and out of each other. It's long straight kind of hair. It's not dreaded really or anything. It's just this kind of nappy old horse hair. And it goes into shadow in this area, and then it comes back out into light. Then there's a little bit of shadow underneath here. And so as I take that in consideration, I've had to create, without totally getting ridiculous, the pattern of who's in front of who with the strands. If I just start willy-nilly throwing down these little striation lines without thinking of which one is passing in front of which other one, and I have the reference, of course, to refer to, which is a beautiful photo from the original art of dark crystal that my dad picked up when I was probably seriously 5 or 6 years old. It's funny, it still has the tag on it. It's all fallen, it fell apart. The binding completely broke out on it. So, because I used to sketch from it all the time when I was a kid. I had a real fertile imagination, was very much into comics, very much into Frazetta, very much into all that stuff as a little guy. And so I was always drawing Star Wars stuff and drawing creatures and characters and scenes, and really just always playing extensively too, with making up really interesting mock scenes. I remember, with Star Wars toys and stuff, and I would just spend countless hours just playing by myself, mostly setting up elaborate scenes, and it was just a lot of fun. It's funny, as you get older, you kind of, a lot of that, some of that gets beat out of you a bit, like it kind of, it's okay when you're 10 or 12 to be doing that, or 9 or whatever, but as you get into your older years, you don't have the luxury, really. We seem to limit ourselves to being able to continue to play like that. So as professional artists, we kind of are allowing ourselves to continue to play in a different way by creating these new movies that the younger kids will get to enjoy, like we got to enjoy the fruits of some other artist's labor, like Brian Froud or something on this particular one, where he was collaborating with Hanson from the Muppets and creating all these little characters that, so it's cool. It's like kind of, at some point you become the next generation that's regenerating the world visually, and you become part of the next generation that takes the reins, or the baton, or whatever you want to call it, and starts the process of continuing to develop new, fresh ideas, and off the shoulders of these older ones that you grew up with. And that's the way we all push forward, I think, as a group, as a human race, And we keep trying to better each generation the skill. And, we haven't seen really the skill sets that were present, in the Renaissance and during that golden era of development since then. So it's overdue that we get back to that really amazing level of proficiency, so that we can then, again, bring amazing ideas to fruition, whether it's through cinema or or just single image paintings or sculptures, or whatever it is that we're doing. We got new technology and stuff coming, so all kinds of fun stuff to look forward to. But notice how, again, as I go in and out of these hairs, in and out, there's going to be a little hot spot that's created along whatever the right angle is to the light source. And then whatever's not is going to pass more into a halftone that's relegated to shadow. So as I do this, I'm trying to just barely skim and get that illusion of long, stringy hair. When I get into the face, we've got all these kind of almost Maori, like New Zealand motifs, almost like scarification or something. But it's like tattoos on the face, but that are actually deep set in the skin. So you do see certain tribal cultures that do that, and so it's kind of a neat look on these old wise beings. Kind of gives them a kind of a edgy wisdom, kind of cool look, some kind of tribal rites of passage or something that they went through. They all look like shaman, or medicine man, or any of that kind of cool indigenous cultures have all those really cool traditions. Aborigines. So I'm just kind of, again, dancing around, looking a little bit at my reference, but not hyper obsessing, almost creating my own version of these cool notice your hand just has to be really good, because you don't have a lot of room for mistakes. So you just, you really have to just be very present to how much ink's on your brush, how much pressure sensitivity you need to push. Like just coming along here, thick, pull up, thin, back to thick, back to thin. But you got one shot at pulling along that line, and if it's all shaky and scratchy and not good, you're gonna have a pretty mediocre look to. Now on his schnauz here, on his little front of his nose, I'm gonna put a little tone going that way, and then I'm gonna move this a little bit like this, and I'm gonna come in with a similar stroke but against it, and now I'm going to spin it back again. So it's a back, normally I spin my board all the time when I'm doing this stuff. I'm going to do a little quill work and just play around with that. So I'm just really having fun with you guys here, and I'm just showing you
Got some questions coming in, if you would like to answer some.
Sure.
So first is, I hope Jeff's doing well. Could I ask what Jeff has been up to recently and any personal projects you're working on?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got obviously I've been working on getting a lot of content finished for the online, which I've been promising the inking for a long time, many years, so I felt like it was time to really push forward and get it done. It was about 60 hours of content. So what you're seeing me do right now, think about 60 hours of me showing you how to do this stuff, but walking you through it like more tutorial-wise. And so that took a lot of time. I've been working on the Bridgman anatomy book. It's 2 volumes. Each one is about 130 pages long. And it's chock full of all kinds of great video and information. It's very interactive. So that's taken up a lot of time. So that's another project I've been trying to bring to fruition. Probably looks like now, I was trying to get it out before Christmas, but I think that's a mistake with shipping and everything being so difficult around the holidays. I don't really want my books being shipped from China in the middle of Christmas melee, so I think I'm going to wait until right after Christmas to launch the Kickstarter and launch that. I know I told you guys I was going to do it a little earlier, but I think I've spent so long on it, I don't want to rush it out. It's going to be awesome. So that's another thing I've been working on. And then I'm working on some ideas for some big painting shows coming up for myself more, but just some really cool, large 6-foot, 7-foot paintings, full of like cast of, lots of different characters. And so there's figure invention, there's landscape invention, there's all kinds of stuff involved in those pieces. And those are pieces that are kind of more for me, so I don't really show them a lot, but they'll probably end up in some shows, maybe the Art Renewal Center Art Salon show, or Oil Painters of America Master Signature show. So those are other ones I've been working on for myself. On top of that, it's just everything from trying to stay in shape to trying to eat better to trying to practice all my skill sets: inking, painting, portrait, landscape, figure, still life, all the different areas I try to stay well tuned in, which require going to class, sitting in on classes, taking classes, teaching classes, continuing to train religiously almost. Very dedicated to my training, always have been. It's what allows me to do things like what I'm doing right now in front of you and talk at the same time, is I can do it because I practice all the time and I stay in good form. If I was to come in right now and have not inked in 6 months and expected to sit down with you guys and talk, say something intelligent, and execute really beautiful inking, it would be almost impossible, and it would be embarrassing. So, all this stuff requires maintenance. And luckily I love it, so it's not that big of a stretch for me to want to do it, because I would probably be doing it if I was independently wealthy anyway. And that's always a good sign, is that if you ask yourself, how do you know if you're doing what you should be doing for a living? You would do it for free probably, or you would do it if you were not having to do it. And you kind of say, well, okay, that's a good way to think about it, is I would be doing intense painting if I was a billionaire. Probably even more intense, because I wouldn't have to be worrying about certain aspects of making a living. So then it's just all about your own personal discipline, because since you don't have to do it, now are you going to do it? Then somebody loves it if they're doing it and they don't even have to. Some people produce because they have to make a living and put their kids through college and do all that kind of normal stuff. And so they find it turns into a job, and then they do it because out of an obligation to do those things. But like I said, I would do it regardless. So always a good thing to think about if someone says, are you doing what you're meant to be doing or whatever? Do you love it? Do you love it enough to do it regardless? And if you can answer that yes, then you're probably moving in the right direction, and it's probably a good trajectory for you to continue to move into. Now, I'm going up against the hair this way. I want to come down also. So what I'm going to do, and it's going to look weird, but I'm going to flip it on its head here, so that I can go with my strokes the other direction as well. So I'm basically coming down on the highlight and coming up on the highlight, and that way it looks more like strands of hair that are getting some light passing over them, rather than always pulling in one direction. It helps me to ink away from myself. I don't like to normally pull towards myself. I will pull some strokes towards myself, but the majority of my strokes go with gravity, or they go, well, now I'm going uphill right now, but it really feels like I'm going downhill because I'm going down the form, but I'm pushing up, but I'm pushing away from myself. So as long as I'm going like this, I don't like to go like this. It doesn't feel right for me. It feels really weird on my arm, and I can't control my pressure sensitivity with the brush very well, or my tools, when I'm doing it that way. So I like to pull away, and I like to have a firm grip on my tool so that I can just push and pull. The kind of pressure sensitivity, the thickness or thinness of that line is then all I'm needing to control. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it the other way back again. Okay. So again, I'm kind of getting this kind of feeling of, now watch, now I'm pulling towards me. So do I never pull towards me? No. I just find that to be, if I'm in a little confined area like this, probably not going to bug me. If I was doing this on my own in my studio and I'm not worried about you guys getting vertigo and passing out while you're watching me, I'd probably be spinning this thing all over the freaking place. You know, it'd be like, I'd be back and forth. But that would be my normal way of doing it. But I know, again, that I'm working kind of handicapped because I want to show you certain things, and I want to make sure that it's as good for everybody as possible, myself and including you guys' experience watching it. So we've got the head kind of laid in, got the hand laid in. You can see where you can move pretty quick in this situation if you are just really have a good hand and good intention. I wouldn't say intention. I do want you to set your intention always, but I mean mostly a foresight with how you're working through these things. So that's why I create almost an overly tight drawing underneath, because I'm solving the problems as I'm doing my drawing, so that when I get into ink, I kind of have a recollection of a game plan already in place because I've spent time solving the drawing issues ahead of time. Whereas if I'm just leaving a lot of these places blank and having to basically improvisationally fill them in with ink, I'm going to be in a lot different situation where I'm going to have to, number one, not be talking. Number two, it's a lot to figure out, and I'd rather do it ahead of time. So I like to prepare my pencils fairly rigorously and fairly complete, with at least a general thought of what I want to do, and I can always change that thought midstream if I find a better, different way that I want to do it. So see, I'm coming around this little piece of information, and then there's these little like dreads in the hair, or there's little beads with it. I mean, again, it's very earthy, very bohemian kind of clan of these elders. And so they're very organic, lots of crystals and beads and little accoutrements and paraphernalia hanging off of them, and all kinds of fun little things to get your teeth into, so to speak. Little greebles, little things to indicate, little pieces of information that you can nerd out on. It's really fun. And then they have the like shoulder pad, kind of like, I don't know, it's like a thicker, you know, kind of almost, I think it looks almost like shoulder pads, but they're like some kind of thicker leather, you know. At least that's what they look like. But they have this embroidery on them, like these weird, puffy, raised sections that, like right in here. And so as I'm looking at them, I'm kind of like, how do I indicate that in ink without making it look really dense? But more, so I'm thinking like still life, like what is the texture that I'm trying to indicate? I don't have color to work with, so I can't separate out pieces of information with temperature. I can only do it with edge and with overlapping shape. So I'm kind of handicapped. Normally I would use temperature to separate form or roll form. I don't have that luxury in this medium. So I have to go to plan B, which is, okay, I've got to really plan out how I'm indicating my lines, who's on top of who, so that I can get depth and separation through line itself. And so again, having to interpret a little differently than I would if I was painting. And that's just because it's a different medium and it's requiring different solutions. But if I can cross-reference a similar solution in another medium that I know how to solve, then I can transfer it over into this medium and think, okay, it doesn't really act like oil, but I do need, so you start going through this checklist of how am I going to indicate this to make it look three-dimensional on a flat surface with cross-contouring of line from a tonal piece of information, a photograph that's clean. And so you're basically going through an interpretation process similar to translating a language. So it'd be like saying, I'm going to translate English into Japanese or something, and you're like, okay, well, I need to really know my English, and then I need to know what I'm trying to adapt it to as far as the structure of this new language, and then I need to adapt and to make it work. And so it's not much different. When you're working between inking, gouache, oil, graphite, charcoal, digital, it's all different, slight different languages and visual languages. And so what I think you should do is respect them similar to verbal languages, knowing that they're a little different because we have a similar vocabulary or alphabet of edges that occur in every medium. So an edge is an edge is an edge. A hard edge is a hard edge, whether I'm doing it in ink, whether I'm doing it in watercolor, whether I'm doing it in oil. I just have to figure out how to get it with that particular medium. Some of them are, gooier. Some of them are more, viscous. Some are more, gritty, like charcoal. And I would have a certain way of trying to indicate that edge. When I translate it into oil, I say, well, now I've got a gooey, wet medium that moves around like ice skating, and it's not very charcoaly. It's not very gritty. It's actually more slimy and wet. Okay, I've got to deal with that now. How do I translate that? How do I get that edge now with this? So you experiment a little bit, but you have another medium that you're more fluent in that you can use as an interpreter or a transition between those, and you can actually utilize that to help yourself come up with a new solution for this new medium. And after you've been doing that for quite some time, you'll find that you can pick up new mediums quite quickly. Becoming masterful in a medium is a whole other thing. There's proficiency and then there's mastery. Those are kind of two different animals. Mastery of anything requires lots of time because it's a familiarity with what you're doing that's so second nature that you don't even have to really think about it. And that requires copious amounts of execution in those mediums. There's no way around it. You can't read about it. You can't think about it, think your way through it. You've got to do it. And that's why I tell people, patience is probably your biggest asset and your biggest issue. If you don't have a huge amount of patience for this kind of problem solving, this kind of experimental, almost detective work, and you like to solve problems visually, and you like to try to figure them out and what makes them work, and how to get a texture to look a certain way, and how to explain this or that so that you can come up with a character like this for some movie, you're going to be probably swimming upstream. It's going to be really hard. If you say, well, I really don't like that, well, maybe art isn't your thing, maybe, it's just you don't like the way it inherently works, the problem solving in this particular thing. So it's important to ask yourself that as you start to develop and start to get really astute at these things is what's motivating you? Why are you motivated to become an artist? Is it something that is absolutely pivotal to your sanity and who you are, or is it just something that you thought might be kind of fun? I mean, that's cool. If you just want to keep it casual like that, that would probably be really not a bad idea. But the key is that you want to have clear intentions and clear ideas if you're setting out to become really good at this stuff. My job as a good teacher is to help align you with those intentions and in a way that best utilizes your visual intelligence, your intelligence in general, to be able to navigate getting now actually good at it. So first we got to set our intention. Our intention is to get good. Why? Because it's always been a voice inside of you that needs to be expressed, and if you don't, you're going to get sick and you're not going to feel really good. And I mean sick like maybe spiritually or emotionally or something, because you're not following your true calling, what it is that how it is that you're supposed to show up on this planet, So, if you have a strong urge to be an athlete, to be a singer, to be an actor, and you go off and you do something else, counter to that because you're afraid. You're afraid you're going to fail. You're afraid you're going to starve. You're afraid your parents are, whatever. You're going to probably get at some point sick, or possibly, because you're not living in alignment with your true nature. And that means you're out of harmony with yourself. And that never goes well, from what I've seen. So it takes a lot of courage to heed a calling to something, calling to medicine, a calling to art, a calling to any of the arts. And it is a calling. It's like a place somewhere inside of you that calls you forward to do this. And so many, the old saying is, many are called, but few will answer. And if you want to be one of those few that answers, then that's kind of what we do. That's kind of who I am. That's kind of what our school's about. It's for those who have kind of are answering the call to become a great or a good technician, a good artist, a good visionary, representational artist. Now, what you do with that, whether you go off into animation, you go off into comics, or you go off into fine art, it doesn't really matter. But you do need to learn your language and your craft, and at some point, and then you can start focusing it into a trajectory that feels good monetarily, feels good, from a standpoint of who you are and what you want to say and what you want to contribute to the arts. And then you can go off and just you have all these skills from which to communicate and express yourself in those areas, and then you set out to become a professional, and then you start to work for people, or you work for yourself, or whatever, you freelance, or and that's the next stage. Right now, when I'm talking about things like inking, I'm talking about very unique techniques, somewhat out of vogue in the general consensus of today's environment. If you were to say, go into DreamWorks or something, or Blizzard, and say, I'm an inker, they'd be like, well, what does that mean, and why do we care? But if you had a really astute art director or somebody that was really quite savvy, they may look at that and say, this is a unique individual, credible skill. Could probably use that skill in lots of areas, especially if you could adapt that to digital or something. This person's dexterity, this person's design sense, this person's ability to think outside the box, this person's ability to design at a high level is pretty amazing. And so it just becomes part of a skill set that you can offer to your clients and say, yeah, I can ink, but I can also paint, but I can also do concept, and I can also do background, and actually I'm really good at character design. And, oh yeah, by the way, and just keep, what do you want me to do? What do you need? And that's if you're going into something like visual development, concepting, where, eclectic, really amazing eclectic skill sets are highly valued. Now, if you're going into, fine art, and you're saying, well, I'm going to be showing, and I need a very specific style and subject matter that everybody can know is me, well, then that's a different problem, that we're dealing with. But you still have to have mad skills. So when it comes right down to it, no matter what you're going to do, the more skills you have, the more options you have, the more fun you have, and the more ability you have to adapt. As careers dry up, or areas change, you just change with them. You just kind of flow with it. Pick up a couple new skill sets when you need to. Oh, I like the idea of always picking up skill sets no matter what. Always, never, they say, gather at leisure what you'll later use in haste. So when you're doing good and you have a good job, don't stop learning. Double down. Get back into class. Go in on the weekends. Go in late at, whatever it takes to continue to build unique skills while you have your good gig that you got. because that gig might change and you might have to change with it, or some new generation of kids come up that are more savvy and they're going to basically put you out of work because they're more able to do everything. They're able to do digital, they're able to do traditional, they're able to do a lot more. So you want to always be prepared. And it's not like you have to be like negatively competitive. It's just you want to be prepared to constantly be able to be relevant in the workplace. And skill sets are always the best way to relevance to me. So cool looking hair, cool looking head, it's coming together. I'm going to continue to work. I like the little, the feet on this thing, I can't even see anything. It's just a black out silhouette shape. So I've had to go in and basically invent these little feet on this guy and just almost give him like half leather over the top of the toes sticking out, kind of just thinking, and I've looked at some other sketches of these guys, but I want to kind of, on these elders, I'm just kind of having fun also putting a little my own design into them. And whenever I'm doing exercise like this, because this exercise is dexterity exercise, it's design exercise, it's trying to absorb the design of another artist's exercise. There's many different things that I'm attempting to get from this that I would say would be beneficial to my development aesthetically, imagination-wise, my ability to envision. I might flip this character into some other character design down the road, and the recollection of having done this one might be just what's needed to help me design my own version of something like this for a different game or job or a comic or something that I'm working on, or a character for some fine art piece or some more imaginative realism piece or something. But again, you can be influenced by all kinds of different people, and you're going to be, and you should be. You're going to even borrow parts of other people's thinking as you develop your own thinking. And like my dad used to say, you can steal the buttons, just don't take the shirt. You can borrow bits and pieces from other artists. Every artist does. Every musician does. They take a riff off somebody else and build off of it. Next thing you know, they got their own unique song. But the impetus was maybe somebody else's first, and then they built off of that and ran with it and came up with their own hit or whatever. Happens in music all the time. I remember Bono from U2 talking about that, saying that they steal from everybody, and they're just really good at it. But they're always doing that. There's very few original thinkers that just never are pulling from anybody else's influence. It's almost always able to be traced back to another artist that came before that person. And you can see the heavy influence that person had on their aesthetic, their design sense, how they design their shapes, how they push their color, how they compose their pieces, the subject matter they use. Even Frazetta, Roy Krinkle, you look at Roy Krinkle's stuff when Frazetta was working with him and assisting him, and basically a lot of his work was springboarded off of Krinkle's work, And so, and he just did it better. He had a better hand. So he took that guy's ideas and made them better than that guy could have ever made them, probably, because he just had a better way of doing it. But he springboarded off that guy's ideas. They weren't all his original ones. So, we're all going to be influenced by somebody. Just make sure it's somebody good. That's what I always say.
Got a question coming in from the chat that could potentially be related to that topic. How has the art industry changed over time with social media, and do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Like anything, I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's one of the most amazing periods in history for artists to live as far as self-marketing, getting themselves out there. Do you absolutely need a gallery now? They're helpful, and they always will probably have a place, but I do think a lot of the heavy lifting now can be done by yourself. A lot of your general getting started, getting originally seen. When I was doing the Comic Con back in the early 90s and into the mid and late 90s, there was no internet. So the way you had to get your work seen is you would have to try to go up to some booth with some guy that theoretically was going to be there that was an editor, try to push your way through, try to get in front of him and try to show him your work, and that was the only opportunity you were going to get. Or you would have to put together a really expensive package of stuff, cold send it out to some editor in New York and hope that he might actually look at it. When most of the time it would just get thrown into a big pile or thrown in the trash or whatever, without even no matter how good it was. So it was maddening. Now, unbelievable. So anyone who did not live prior to the internet or does not understand what marketing was before the internet, you guys have died and gone to heaven. I mean, it is an incredible period for motivating and getting your stuff out there. So I think it's the best thing that ever happened for artists being independent, taking the control and the power back into their own hands and getting out there. But you do have to still work just as hard to market as you do to do the work. So you're still going to have to find someone to help you with that possibly, or an agency to help you or something. But if you're really savvy and you're just a hard charger, you can do a lot on your own now. So I think it's a wonderful time to be an artist. One of the most, you have the best shot ever, I think, of making professional waves and getting out there and doing things on your own, self-publishing. You've got crowdfunding platforms. I mean, you got all kinds of cool stuff. The key is that you need to be good. There's too many people, I think, just rushing out there and flooding the market with just crap, and it's like, oh, I'm going to self-publish. What? I mean, how about we have some skills first? How about we have, it's like I always hear people saying, I want to develop a portfolio. Okay, well, that's 10 years of work or 5 years of work to get your skills good enough to develop a portfolio. You don't develop a portfolio and then get good. You get good and then develop a portfolio, and you have to understand that there's a protocol and there's a pecking order, and you get in the pecking order and you work really hard, you work really diligently, and you get paid really. I mean, what you get paid with is the dividends are skills. The skills then are put into specific formats to become a portfolio that is specifically geared towards soliciting work in a very specific area: storyboarding, concepting, background painting, fine art landscape, fine art portrait commissions, whatever. You got to, so you narrow it down. Then you put the portfolio together. Then you present it to an agent. Then you present it to a gallery. Then you present it out there on Instagram, whatever you do. And someone sees it and someone says, do you do work? Yes, I do. How much do you charge? Da, 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 da. All of a sudden you start your freelance career. You get some work, you do it well, you get a little bit more work, you come in kind of conservative with your pricing, then somebody else hires you. Now you have more work than you can do, so you can raise your prices and get rid of some of the earlier ones, or you may want to still do favors for them just because they're the ones that gave you your first shot. And you just start organically building a career. And that's why I say it takes a decade or 15 years, because it's going to be a good 3 to 5 years of just skill development. It's going to be another 1 or 2 years of developing a portfolio, because you're going to have to probably work a job while you're doing your pieces, and not every piece is going to come out perfect. So you got to put that portfolio together while doing other jobs. Then you got to present it. So by the time you're into it, really getting out there in traffic with some good skill sets, if you've done your homework right and studied correctly in the right schools or the right education, you're looking at a good 5 to 10 year period. But that goes like that. It goes like so fast that you could be 10 years without good training, and you're never even going to be 1 iota closer than you were 10 years ago. And that's the flip side of it. So I hope that answered that question. I mean, I would say fantastic time, love social media, think it's mostly abused. People spend too much time on it. They should be spending time doing this kind of stuff instead of searching, and just scouring, and looking at all these other good efforts. Do your own efforts. Separate your time out for a very certain amount of time that you use social media, an hour a day, 2 hours a day, whatever, but spread it out and don't waste a lot of time just hyper obsessing and tunnel visioning on what other people are doing. Look at it, be aware of it, and then put your nose to the grindstone getting your actual skill sets, because that's what's going to make you a contender. Not, how savvy are you on the internet, but you don't have anything to even really present that's worth anything. That's the cart in front of the horse syndrome. You got the cart way out in front of the horse. You got to make sure that your skills are there first, then really dump yourself into the social media campaigns and really get yourself ready to go, and get out there. That's my take on it.
I feel like I have so many things that I'd want to
Add on to.
Continue the conversation about that. We got so many good questions coming in from
That's cool.
all kinds of people. So here's one about traditional art. Hi Jeff, always liked your honest take on art and the business of art. Do you still do any illustration work? I'm wondering if there's much demand for traditional work in publishing.
I don't do as much just because my energy has been focused on education and on setting a legacy for that, because I've spent so much time, I think, in the lane that I've been in, that I haven't been out there. But I know Eric's been out there pretty heavily. I know Lucas has been out there pretty heavily. These are guys I originally trained as illustrators back when I taught illustration. Now they've taken the reins and gone out and really pursued it avidly as their professional, where they're going. And when I talked to Eric about it, I mean, he's doing wonderfully. Lucas is doing wonderfully. They've found little niche markets for themselves, which sometimes you have to do. Like Lucas works primarily for Magic the Gathering, and they fly him all over the world, and he's one of their premier artists, and he gets to basically do these really beautiful imaginative realism paintings. He gets paid pretty decently for doing them from the client, and then he turns around and he can sell those originals as collectors to collectors that love the game or love World of Warcraft or Magic the Gathering or whatever it is. And there's a whole secondary market, which is probably quite a bit more lucrative than the primary market, but he can then use, so basically what he's doing is using a brand to be able to give permission to sell that original, gets paid by them, gets second paid by the collector more than he got paid by the client, but the client, he's utilizing their platform to sell that to collectors that love that platform. So it's kind of like he has a double whammy kind of career going, and then you also have that secondary market of people that come to him or Eric just to have a commission from them. So if you were able to build that up as another career, you might have 10, 15 commissions backed up that are probably more lucrative than the work you're doing. You continue to do the work to pay your bill, so you end up with a nice little double whammy. That's where you can really start capitalizing. Then you can get into the print markets and things like that with your work, and that's a whole nother area. And so there's a lot of opportunity. The key is having work that's so good that people want to hire you. See, all this stuff is contingent on being good. If you're not good, it's a moot point. There's no point in even talking about it, in my opinion. It's just wah, 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 wah. It's like, well, we got to get good first. We get good. Now we got something we can work with. Now we can start thinking about how are we going to market this stuff? What avenues are out there? What's the best place for me to put my energy? Where do I want to focus my what I'm doing? But see, most people are focused on that, thinking that's the magic, and they're not thinking, what is it I'm even marketing? Because they're so enamored with some YouTube phenom or something that got, wealthy doing something that really wasn't even very skilled. It was like literally the 1 in a million kind of syndrome. And now everybody's like, I want to be that 1 in a million. Well, how about you just get really good, and then you got tangible skills, and then you can actually market those skills and spend your time on that. And then the marketing will take care of itself, or it will be easier if you have something to market that's really good.
So there's a lot of people nowadays doing a lot of their training digitally. So somebody asks, do you think it's still important for artists to base their fundamentals in traditional art with the rise of digital?
I do, only because I think that what's going to happen is you're going to end up with 6 million people that can all do the same thing and all rip each other off in a matter of seconds. So there's going to be, where's the value in that? If they can just find a guy that can duplicate and gank your style in a matter of seconds, then they can just get a cheaper guy to do what you do, and you're not going to be very valuable. So ultimately, the market's going to be flooded, And when it's flooded, the only thing that you can separate yourself out is if you can do things that somebody else can't do. In the traditional, the window, it's kind of like an immediate gratification versus a long-term gratification. The people going quickly digital just want to get out and make money as quick as possible because that's all they're focused on. And these are not the people that I'm usually training or talking about. These are not the people that love the craft, that are doing it. You might as well be out selling real estate or a hedge fund or doing insurance or something that you can make money at that's just money driven. My goal is to get as many people underneath me so I can make as much money doing as little as possible. Okay, well there's whole people that's all they do. That's their career. And then there's other people that say, no, I want to do something incredibly amazing that nobody else can do, or very few people. And I'm going to train superior, more intelligently, and harder so I can do that. Those are the minority for sure, but those are the ones that have longevity and that usually are not in and out with every phase that passes. The people you're talking about that are running out, learning digital, it's a short-sighted solution to the complex problem that most people want to avoid because it's too hard to work. So they're basically saying, I'm just going to shorthand it and get a faux version of doing it And yes, that's what they want in gaming, and that's what they want in movies. If that's all you ever want to do with your life, and you want to be working in gaming when you're 62 years old, which you're probably not going to want to be doing, go for it. But I think at some point you're going to wake up and go, I am so tired of doing this particular thing digitally that I just want to go paint something. I want to go draw something. I want to do something that's original. At least that's how I feel. But
I feel like there's probably a lot of people out there that are good digital artists too that feel the same way just about doing things digitally like that. You know, they still want to train hard.
Yeah, and I think if you use digital for what it's good at, which is quick fixes, cool, doctoring up a painting or a sketch, that's how I would like to use it. But again, it's hard for me because I know there are some phenomenal digital painters out there that I'm extremely respectful of, and I love what they do. And if that's what makes them tick and that's what they love, then God bless them, and they're doing the right thing, and go for it. But to say that you're going to train your patience, your dexterity, and your things like that through digital, it's probably not going to happen as much because digital is too immediate gratification. It's too easy to make mistakes and not have to be responsible for them. So there's a different patience level that's required. There's a different procedural protocol that's different in digital versus traditional. And if I had to say the real value in traditional is more ethereal, abstract skill sets that one gets, like patience, perseverance, persistence, things like that I think are a little bit more demanding in traditional than they are digital. That's what I would value in that training, because that's kind of what carries you through some of your harder periods when you're having a hard time in the profession for whatever reason. You're going through some personal hardship or something's happening in your life that's demanding your attention while you're still trying to produce. That's where the qualities that I'm talking about with traditional kind of really would come to play and probably be very helpful for you versus more of an immediate gratification kind of thing that I don't know. So, but I think it's not really one or another. I think each person is going to have to approach that with their own their own way of seeing the value in it. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm going to be some antiquated dinosaur one of these days, and nobody will want to do anything like what I do anymore, which is actually kind of good because then I'll be in the minority of people doing it, So then I'll be like, okay, that's great, whatever,
I heard Eric say once, some of the best or pretty much most of the best guys that are doing digital now are ones that had trained traditionally.
Yeah, I agree. Like the Craig Mullins, the Jamie Jones, and all the guys that can really wield, or Nathan Falks or any of those guys. They're all really exceptional old school traditional guys that picked up digital just for speed and for efficiency with their career. But really, if you were to kind of probably have a beer with them and just hang out with them, they'd probably say, "Yeah, I really miss just slinging clay and the smell of the paint and the tactile sensitivity of the surfaces and just the whole." The whole organic feel of the traditional world of art. I miss that a lot. I wish I could do more of that, but unfortunately my job requires that I work so quickly and can make so many changes that I had to go digital because I just can't do it as fast in these traditional mediums, even though I'd love to. I mean, that's probably what you would get out of most of them,
So we got a question coming in from Ivan.
Hey, Ivan.
He says, how much time would you divide to studying compared to personal work, and how to approach perspective drawing? I guess that's kind of two different questions.
Yeah, I would say,
so yeah.
If I address the first one, I would say that, ultimately your personal work will become your studying. So what you want to do is, what I like to do is I like to wrap most of my procedural learning into the way that I create my pictures. For example, I may start my first iteration of an idea for a sketch with a ballpoint pen in my sketchbook. So I'm practicing ballpoint pen sketching. Then I probably will take that sketch, maybe transfer it onto a piece of Bristol and do a color comp in gouache. And I'll work my gouache phase. And so now I'm getting practice with my gouache while I'm working out my thumbnails for my color keys for my big oil painting that I'm going to be doing. So now I've worked a combination of either graphite sketching and inking together, or maybe separate, or one or the other, depending on how my mood and what piece I'm working on. And then so now I've got 2 or 3 mediums that I'm practicing as I'm actually building my own original content. And ultimately, as I get better and better, a lot of people say, why do you work so methodically and why do you prep so much? A lot of times it's because I'm using that as an excuse for maintaining skills that I would like to maintain and stay good in. And I'm just wrapping it into a slightly more methodical part of my process, which actually helps me anyway. So I'm getting a lot of bang for my buck. I'm learning techniques. I'm getting better in those techniques so that when I teach them, I'm really tuned all the time. My brain's getting to work from different angles because I'm having to translate between different mediums. That's helping me to flesh out my ideas a little bit more efficiently. And then when I get to the finished piece, I've gone through 5 or 6 different medium iterations in the process of building that idea, which has kept me growing, getting better, getting more proficient, getting more masterful with my skills, and coming up with my original content at the same time. So it's brilliant to me.
2 for 1.
Yeah, but it's harder to do because a lot of people would say, half-ass it and just say, no, I'm not going to do the comps. I'm too lazy. I think I have a good feel for the color anyway. I don't really need to do 5 color iterations, da-da-da-da. And I would say, okay, that's fine. But I'm going to do them because I'm practicing 16 different things while I'm doing it. And that way I'm staying tuned in all those and I'm getting better at the same time and I'm growing and I'm not taking the easy route out. I'm actually continuing to dive deeper into these mediums to become more intuitive and more efficient and more amazing at them, you know. So Ivan, that's how I hopefully that answered that question.
Do you want a little break between questions for a sec?
Yeah, and I think I might take a little tiny break,
Okay.
just for a second, and then I'll come back and I'm moving pretty good on this little guy, so he's going pretty fast. Evan, how you doing, man?
Pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. You know, coming in and doing my thing. see here. Okay. Cool. Alrighty, so remove our high-tech notice. And back onto these little kind of, feet that are, I can't see, like I said, a damn thing on them. I'm not terribly happy with the cross-hatching in this area. I like this flow over here. It's just my own personal, I look for a combination of knitting. When I say knitting, it's how the strokes play off of each other, how the cross-contouring wedges. And since I'm doing a lot of that improvisationally on the fly, it's not, and talking, it's not that easy to really get it to always totally feel. And like I said, I don't ink every day. Like if this was my medium of choice and I was literally doing it 5 days a week, I would be smoking good at it. But it's an art. I mean, it's an art within an art, really. And the language of it is so unique that there's 1,000 ways you could knit this thing together, literally. And there's different organic looks to it. There's ones that are more mechanical. There's ones that are more sloppy and chaotic. And again, since I don't do this 24/7, I don't have a style completely developed. So I have like a hybrid of like 5 or 6 different ones that I'm kind of working with. So now I'm going to go against this contour, especially up in the darker area, up underneath this shelf of drapery that's hanging down. And I'm going to want that to be a darker area. So how do I do that? I could flat black it. I could create multiple levels of cross contouring different directions. Like I could now turn it this way and go back through it yet again with a similar feathering out. And each time I do this, the little dots of light are going to get less and less and more dense, creating the illusion of a darker, more dense shadow pattern. So when I turn it back upright and I look at that area, it's now quite a bit darker up underneath that, tucking underneath and creating the illusion of a darker shadow without just flat blacking it. I'm creating that through a crisscross moire pattern of information that's giving the illusion of depth. And so if I want to leave some breathing room into my shadows and not make it too dense, I'm going to want to do it that way, or some hybrid of that. If I want to go in with a stain and put it over the top of all this and knock that whole thing down, removing the actual light of the paper and making that all dark and still having those lines, if you were to come close up to it and look at it, that's another way I could do it. So any one of those could be adequate for creating the illusion of a shadow. How I creatively do that, again, there's a lot of different ways. And so I'm imagining on this guy's little feet that he's got some kind of drapery or something wrapped, like they used to wrap feet a long time ago before they had like shoes. So it's just like more of a, like some kind of cloth kind of wrapped around the top of the foot. And I'm kind of looking at it, and I left it blank right in here, so I'm gonna have to do a lot of improvisational whatever figuring out there, but the key is just to let your hand move quickly and fluidly, dropping the brush ever so slightly. And that's, again, that just takes a really good hand. So I don't pull my lines really slowly because it's really hard to do that. I pull them with pretty deft, fast strokes. And that requires a really confident hand. Again, so I might turn it this way. And then I just dip my ink in there. So I want to see what kind of ink I'm working with. But look at this, like, it's pretty fast. And then as you look at that, see how that creates a little highlight running down there. Darker here, darker here, darker here. So it looks like it's sweeping and turning and kind of twisting a little bit as it goes up there. And it just has a nice calligraphic feel to it. So it looks believable to me. It also looks aesthetically pleasing to me. So I like both of those things. Now the toes, because you got these kind of funny little I'm going to again pull, starting thick, and then let up the pressure, thick, let up the pressure, and let it feather away so that it looks like there's a little complexion on the tip of the toes. I think that'll look good. I like that look in general, and it's just something that I'm going to aesthetically go for. Now I put a little dark in there to separate out this one toe, skip that little gap, pick up the flow around this one, skip, and maybe tuck it in right there. Now this one, again, not knowing exactly what the front structure of their little toes look like, I'm going to kind of just make up, wrapping topographically, slight bowing to my line as I wrap around the top plane of the foot. Now as I come around here, I'm going to pull towards me, which I don't normally do, but that's okay because it's just a little kind of light. Let's shoot into that a little bit. Let's go this way, and then let's switch and go this way. Okay, so now that's created some illusion of some little like kind of funky little foot, and whether or not that's exactly it or not doesn't matter to me. It looks good. I'm going to go with that. Put a little cast shadow under that. Maybe put a little shadow under that part. Let's move it this way a little bit, and let's get in a position that's conducive to wrapping over the top. Now let's switch here and move and then let's go back. Now let's dip the brush again. Let's spin it on our rag to get rid of a little bit of it, because when you first dip it, it's going to be a little too drippy on there. And I want just the right amount of ink to allow me to pull the line. So I'm going to go thick to thin, 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 thick. Off of this bottom part. Now, I went thicker here and a little thinner here, so darker shadow into halftone as I roll around the heel. And I'm going to put a little bit of a thin line treatment there. I'm going to turn it again. Pinch, 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 pinch. Okay, so creating just a little bit of illusion, letting a little light come in here. This is too much light, so I'm going to have to do something out in here, but I'm going to take a little break from that, go back up into this hand. So they have two arms. Here's an arm, here's an arm. Trying to separate out these arms when you have so much no value, no color to work with really, it's a chore. So this is drapery ending right probably in there. This finger is tucking, the hand's tucking underneath. This is all drapery right here. First I'm going to handle this hand. Here's the knuckle. Here's some wrinkles in the knuckle. Here's the knuckle flaring. Here's it cutting in. Here's a little cast shadow of it onto the next finger that's next to it. Here's a little piece of some bead dangling. Here's another bead. Here's a little probably cast shadow. Here's the drapery, this drapery here, running over the top of the hand. Most of these fingers over in here are in deep shadow. So I might just do that to get my shadow. And here's a little dimple in the knuckle. Here's a little rolling of the upper knuckle. And then we'll roll back towards us as well, leaving a slight highlight running down the middle of it. We're going to put a little tone underneath this knuckle before we get to the tip of the finger. And then we're going to do the same on the tip of the finger. And then we'll go against it just to show that there's a little ledge as it jumps, goes down, jumps back up again for those knuckles. Man, that's complicated little stuff to be doing here. So here's some of the drapery again above it. And if I look correctly, I don't think that's a finger. I'm going to make that part of the drapery. So I'm going to fill it in, some line. Now I'm going to dilute down some ink. So just water. And I'm going to, that's too dark. This is all in shadow. Rather than trying to do it through a moire pattern, like a crisscross pattern, I'm just going to do a cheat here. That's why you want a pretty durable, like 500 ply, so that when you're putting these ink washes down, it's not going to buckle up on you and get too weird. So that's cool. We could do the same thing with the hair. I mean, but we could go in and say, okay, I want to put that more into shadow. So ink washes can be very effective on top of linear ink explanation to really get a good illusion of again, the wrapping form like that. Gives it another three-dimensional feel. Still inking. I don't see, I'm using ink. I'm not using white paint. I'm not using anything else. So it's pretty much straight inking. It's just using washes. And I don't see that as a faux pas. Some people do. Okay, so now the cast shadow on the ground is going to be a little more dense. I'm going to try to keep most of my lines topographically looking like terra firma, meaning ground, plane. So I don't want them going in a vertical manner. I want them to sit horizontally on the ground plane. So most of my strokes will be pulled fairly flat. And I'm going to create some kind of wedge pattern because I just think it looks nice.
Sepia is kind of cool.
Yeah, I like it. Just nice change of pace. And you can get Dr. Martin's dyes, and if you look at Frazetta's, a lot of his, little ink wash watercolor sketches. He was amazing with watercolor too. His little doodle sketches he did in watercolor are just freaking to die for. I mean, fuck, the guy was so good. And he used like Mickey Mouse watercolors, like the worst shit. I mean, it was like those little kits that you get when you're using fifth grade or something.
I don't know what the deal with that was.
Just cheap, man.
I didn't get some good stuff.
That's what was always my question. Is like, dude, your stuff's gonna be worth millions of dollars, and it's done on like cartoon, it's just terrible. So that's kind of cool, like the way that sits as a cast shadow, but it has a pattern to it that's not, has an aesthetic value to it that I like. Doing really good with this. So I'm thinking the tail, I like that tail area, this little area here, I think would be fun to show. And so let's get into that a little bit. So I've got this like Mucha-esque design of the hair sitting here on the ground. I want to think of it like Mark Schultz, Frazetta, Mucha. That's all.
Got some more questions coming in.
Sure.
what do you think about Rockwell tracing? I used to love his works, but recently I found out that he always used a projector, and it changed how I feel about his works.
Yeah, projector. I mean, he was quite proficient, I think, way before the camera came in. He used to do his stuff from life. I mean, he would actually set the scene up and paint it like alla prima. I've seen him. I've seen pictures of him doing that. I think as a professional, when you use tools like that, as long as you can prove that you can draw, I mean, really can draw. That's why I still use projectors, and I used to think for every projection drawing that I do, I'm going to do 5 drawings from life to make sure that I don't ever use it as a crutch, but I just use it as a tool to help me expedite my process so that I can get my job done on time and get paid. So for me, it doesn't really, I don't discredit, because once you have your projection and then you start to paint, your projection is going to vanish at some point, and then you're going to be freehanding in paint, basically. And it happens with everybody, and that's why a lot of people get so screwed up, is they either try to paint around their projection too carefully, and then it ends up with a really cheesy look, because they're so afraid that if they lose their drawing, they'll never find it again, because they really don't know how to draw, that then they're using the projector as a weakness. But whether you're using digital to lay out your paintings, or you're doing to assist you in your compositional choices, or you're using projectors to help you get it down, I don't really think that should affect too much what you think of Rockwell. He was a phenom of pushing paint. I mean, he was just so good. So whatever tools we use to get our job done, I'm okay with. It's hard enough already. It doesn't matter what tool is at your disposal. It is going to be a momentous event of, stars aligning and biorhythms working and, whatever, to just get a painting to come out at all decent. It's tough no matter what you do. So I'm just like, dude, use a projector. Still freaking blows my mind what that guy was able to do pushing paint around. Projection or no projection, underpainting or no underpainting. It's at the end of the day, what a phenomenal talent. So I hope you don't let that affect you too much with him. But each person will have to determine, again, their purest nature of what they find. But almost every artist was using whatever tools were available at the time. And again, the ones that really do blow you away are people like Bouguereau, or someone who obviously was working with probably a photographic memory or eidentic memory or something, Alma Tadema, Kim Jong-Lee. I mean, any of these guys, these new guys, are people that obviously are working with a retention of ability that is far beyond most people's cognitive skills. Those people are quite amazing, but they're also genetic phenoms. They are genetically wired to memorize visual information photographically. That's an incredible benefit to a painter. I mean, it would be an amazing skill to possess, but it would also probably come with some really not so good stuff, hard to indicate if you see that clearly. So they're usually not very good indicators. Usually the telltale sign is they're hyper real painters that existed before cameras, like Bouguereau, like Jerome, like Alma Tadema is a perfect example. And so obviously working with some phenomenal recall of some sort. Anyway, kind of got off track there, but.
No, it's just, I was just in the Sunday workshop trying to paint, and it went terribly. So if you think projector, why don't you just try projecting something and then try painting it and see how hard it really is to.
Yeah, it's hard, period. So I think just, use the tools you need to. Train so that if they break or you don't have access to them for some reason, that you can still do it. It'll just take you a little bit longer. So every once in a while, I do like to do a piece without any projection or anything, but I like to work from my own sketches. So what I like to do is work my sketches and my ideas out for my characters and then project from my own drawings. And all I use the projector for is to scale things up and down very quickly so I don't have to freehand and grid them. So it's just more of a convenience thing. But
Doug was talking about that too, that during his Friday night stream, he did a little digital comp of his piece, and then he basically took it and blew it up and just kind of, I think, traced it out and basically started to refine the details once he had kind of a digital sketch.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, again, whatever tools you use to get your workflow to work for you, to get your jobs done, to get paid, to be able to make a living, it's all good.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, we have to be pragmatic about the fact that we are basically working. If you're a freelancer, you're working under tight deadline on command, you know. And why wouldn't you use a projector if it was going to make your job a little bit better? I mean, you know, I would say it's fine, you know, to use tools like that if it's beneficial, but just don't use them as a crutch.
So we got another question here. Have you worked in comics or video games? And if so, can it be viewed online?
No, you know, I did a lot of like freelance stuff back when I was really starting out. I did stuff for like Image Comics and I did it under the name Zook, which is a different pen name that I had because I didn't want to mix it with my fine art and I wanted to have fun with it and I didn't want to have to answer to my other areas I was working in. So it was just kind of a pen name that was kind of had a funny history to the name. But if you look up Zook, you might find some stuff. But I started getting traction in those industries, but it was prior to the internet. It was a lot more difficult to do fine art level imaginative realism, which right now, imaginative realism is starting to become a thing of its own. And I do think that's going to be one of the next big areas of fine art is a lot of great painters, in my opinion, exist over in comic and fantasy work that don't really get the fair credit they deserve for how good they actually are technically. And so I think you're going to see a lot of those people meandering over into the fine art arena. You already see that at places like, if you look at Arcadia Gallery, you see a lot of contemporary, figurative, traditional / imaginative realism type painters really excelling and doing really well. And I'm really happy to see that because it opens up possibly me going back into more of a fantasy realm of realism where I can melt the two together, which I always wanted to kind of do, but at the time the market just wasn't very fertile in the 90s and stuff. It just wasn't really, people weren't paying 30 grand for a fantasy piece, whereas we had Chris Ron out a couple years ago and he was, I think, doing the boot camp with Eric and Lucas, and I think he sold a piece for around that. And he's a fantasy guy, but really good painter. And so you're starting to see people get more real money for this stuff, and so I think you're going to see that as a more viable area that hasn't been completely tapped out and kind of worn out,
It's a lot more, that kind of stuff's becoming a lot more popular
yeah,
in pop culture.
Yeah, when you see like, Game of Thrones and
Yeah.
all the popular aspects of these new things coming out, you're seeing that generation growing up might want to buy that as their fine art rather than Western art. I mean, it's like a completely different thing. So you're getting a new generation of collectors that are making their money in more unorthodox ways that actually are really fascinated and love these particular genres and wouldn't mind investing in original painting by someone that works in those industries, So that's cool.
Perfect place to learn how to do that is the illustration boot camp.
That's
It's
it.
happening.
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, that's another great one if you're interested in coming out and working with Lucas and Eric and who they have. They have
Ryan Hendricks.
Ryan. Yeah, Ryan coming out this year, who's awesome. And it's an opportunity for you to really get in there and do picture making and have them walk you through the process of what it takes to work in those industries and what it takes to put a piece together. And it's really a wonderful opportunity. So yeah, that's something we have coming up in, I think, January. So if you're interested, look up on our site and maybe we'll see you out for that or something. I might even pop in and take it. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about it.
That'd be cool.
Because I have a big piece I want to work on and
Oh, sweet.
it's more fantasy, so might even see me in there.
How did you spell your Zook?
Oh, it's just Zook.
Okay.
But it was fun. I mean, that's like, the dinosaur piece I put up, which was the one with the Harleys and the dinosaur and the T-Rex. That was
yeah.
done during that period. I was,
Yeah, that thing's cool.
yeah, it was kind of, I did a lot of Spectrum stuff. I think I got a sculpture in Spectrum, and then I had that ink in Spectrum, and then I had an oil paint, some heavy metal covers in Spectrum. And so I was kind of heading in that direction, but the market just wasn't really ripe like it is now. And so I kind of went off more into fine art and traditional landscape, traveling, painting my adventures, things like that, which is still a really cool way to go about it. Still something I value greatly in in my fine art was the ability to travel the world, see things, express it, come back, paint it, sell it, and make a living through your adventures. Just seemed like a really cool bohemian, artistic style of life that resonated a lot with who I am at a soul level. Is I like adventure, I like travel, and I like to do what I want to do. So most of it was like, how can I parlay those areas into a viable business opportunity, you know?
I'll give you another break from the questions for a second.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I'm just, yeah, doing little beads and greebles and leather straps. And so a lot of this is just, you know, again, having kind of prepped it ahead of time, I can move really quickly and efficiently through this illusion of stuff to get it to look more, again, the illusion of complexity through slaps and dashes and smoke and mirrors, really. So it's an illusion. This whole thing is just an illusion on a flat surface that looks like something that we're going to associate with this creature or whatever. And you know, a lot of it's going to be your mind saying, oh, that must be a piece of leather, that must be some kind of strap, that must be a piece of jewelry, that must be some kind of embroidery or whatever. And you're going to just indicate enough of it to get the viewer to be able to fill it in and say, oh, yeah, I think I know what that is. And they don't always need to even know what it is. It just needs to look cool in the context with which it belongs. And if that's the case, then we're working in the realm of indication, which is one of the most sought after areas of development, because it's one of the hardest ones to teach, is how does one indicate the illusion of something that looks more real than the thing itself? How is that possible, and how does one do that? And it is possible, I will tell you that, and it is hard, because it means that you usually have to know the thing that you're indicating quite intimately or quite legitimately in order to strip it down into its essential elements and look like the thing it is that it's supposed to be, and then some. So it requires a huge amount of knowledge, working knowledge, and also just in creative knowledge on how to bend something and how to cheat something to make it look like that. That's an art in and of itself, and we call it indication. So when you hear me use the term indication, it's indicating something, a nose plane, a piece of jewelry, a patina, in such a way that it captures the essence of that thing, and without actually explaining that thing literally. That's what we're talking about when we say indication. When we talk about calligraphy, it's the type of strokes that we use to indicate something that we're doing. It's your handwriting. It's your brushmanship. In painting, we call it brushmanship. In drawing, we call it calligraphy. And it's very much like when you think calligraphic, like a calligraphy writer, it's very elegant, it's very poetic and beautiful and flowing, and usually good calligraphy is an art in and of itself, whether it's writing calligraphy, calligraphic writing, which has kind of also gone the way of Latin or of maybe inking. It's not quite as easy to find someone. It's like back in the day when they used to do mezzotints, or they would do etchings, and the guys doing the etchings were probably as good or better than the people that did the original pieces as far as a hand. I mean, it was amazing when you look at what some of those guys were able to do. And so all these terms that you'll hear me just casually wing out there may not make much sense to you if they're not explained. I just take them for granted that everybody knows what calligraphy is. Everybody knows what idealization of form is. Everybody knows what these different kind of abstract terms, which really fall under the header of aesthetics, which means what makes something look good. What makes a BMW M4 look so superior to another car? It's just curves and straights, but someone knows how to put those curves and straights in such a way that almost everybody would agree it's cool looking. Now, what is that? What formula is that person using? What algorithm are they using to get something to look that good? That is extremely difficult to explain, if not impossible, but almost agreed upon by everybody. That's what's curious, and that's what's cool about it, and that's what's mystical about it, and that's why it's so difficult to teach, because it is in the realm of the unexplainable, but yet able to be observed and able to be felt by most people. That's weird, right? That's like, damn, how does one quantify that? How does one get that filter from which to work from that can create those kind of things? Because theoretically, that's the filter you want to be using for everything you do. For this character you design, for the background you're designing, for the person's nose in life class, for their kneecap, for how you do a knee, for how you do an elbow, for how you draw a beautiful toe, and how you, everything needs to be put through that filter. But that filter cannot be quantified. And so you're trying to learn something that's very abstract. And the best way that I know to do that is to show it, to do. But that's a hard way to teach, to show all the time, because that means you've got to be able to do it all the time. But you can't even explain how you do it, because there's no way to explain how you do that, right? But it's a culmination of many different ways of studying stacked upon each other that sooner or later hits a tipping point, and now all of a sudden, instead of designing bad strokes, you just happen to be designing good strokes most of the time. 3/4, and then all of a sudden it's 90% of the time you're drawing, and you don't even know really exactly how to quantify that or how that actually happened, other than you studied Frazetta, and you studied Bridgman, and you studied with Jeff, and then you studied with Eric, and then you studied with this person, and we got you to do all these things that allowed us to do that, even though we don't know, but we know that it does work, and we've seen it work time and time again. So we're going to use that same formula on you guys and get you to be able to do the same thing. But I guarantee you, once you're able to do it, you probably won't be able to explain it. And you'll have to then show it in order to communicate it to other people through your work. But that's the things that when I talk about art being kind of mystical and kind of difficult to teach at an elite level, it's because of exactly what I'm explaining right now, that it's so difficult to learn it. And it's why it's so essential, if possible, to be around somebody that does it well, whether that's in video form or whether that's in live action form. I mean, there's no real substitute for being here in person, but I know many of you can't do that. So if you can't do it, go online with us and get it that way. It's definitely doable, and I've watched people now doing it for a number of years and getting phenomenal, so I know it works. But yes, of course it's more fun to be here and witness it firsthand. But that's why I do all these Friday Night Lives. That's why we share all this without holding back anything, really. I'm not, you're seeing how I design, and I'm talking about it as I go, and I'm hoping it looks cool at the end of the day. But I think I'm trying to put it through that filter I'm talking about, and I'm doing it while I'm talking. So it's another layer of difficulty. But I find it very entertaining for myself and also for those that are able to witness it firsthand. So it's a gift, but it's also it's something that I don't take lightly. It's something that I feel like I've earned it through hard work and patient, diligent focus over many, many decades. And so I find great value in it. I find great value in passing it on to other people. I find it fascinating to see what they're going to do with it. And I think that it's kind of how we push the arts forward, is by learning together and having, if no one's willing to share what they know how to do, it's going to make it really tough to get any traction of any kind of grand scale, because it's just the blind leading the blind. It's too difficult to learn this stuff if no one's showing anybody. It's hard enough if someone's showing you how to do it, much less just sitting around pecking around hoping you just discovered all those concepts I just casually mentioned, just on accident, not knowing that that's even what you're supposed to be learning, because there's no formula for it. So this is why it takes so long to get good at this stuff, because it does have an element of it that's very difficult to get your head around. Go ahead.
What would you say to the people that tend to get good faster than others? Maybe they just learn quicker, or they pick up the skills maybe faster than somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, when I've spent most of my life now trying to reverse engineer how people get good, how I got good, why I'm unique in certain ways, why other people I've met are unique in their ways, and which ones are more unique and which ones are learnable, and what stuff is not learnable. There are some things like eidetic memory that cannot be learned. When it's Kim Jong-Lee, right? When he does starts from left and ends up on the right and he has no drawing in his freehand, that is a gift. Yeah. I'm not saying the guy didn't work his butt off, because he's a phenom that works really hard, those guys are dangerous, right? That's a double.
That's the rock.
Those are the ones that really get somewhere and do some crazy stuff because they're driven as if they weren't that natural, and yet they are. And I'm not to belittle him in any way, shape, or form. I find him incredibly fascinating and incredibly amazing. But I don't think I could teach someone to do that. I think I could teach someone through very diligent study to develop a very good recall that allows them to do things like that, but not with such effortlessness and speed. It would be a lot of work, it'd be hard, and it would always feel like you're really pushing 100%, man. Whereas I think with him, I get this feeling that it's pretty chill, and it's not really taxing him to the hilt, So I think you're always going to find people that defy the rules. If you go through a big art school, you're going to find someone that's going to get good regardless of whether it's any good or not. They would have gotten good. They know how to emulate. They've somehow figured out how that works naturally, and they have a good propensity towards emulation, and they understand, and they're good problem solvers, and they're outside the box thinkers, and they're just perfectionist enough to be able to leverage themselves, and they're also disciplined enough to leverage themselves. There's a lot of qualities you'd have to have, and you would say, why does that person get better next to this one? Well, when they're concentrating on their studies at home, they're not daydreaming. Most of the time, they have an intention, set an intention, and they're focusing on that intention while they're doing what they're doing, rather than just doing it and thinking about 52 other things. That person's going to get better 10, 15, 20 times faster than the person that has a mind that has a tendency to wander all over the place and think about what they're having for dinner, the argument they have with their wife or husband, whatever's going on in their head. If that person's unable to shut that stuff out and focus, they're going to have a hard time with retention, and someone that is better at retention is going to move a lot faster. And that's just the way it is. And now why that person is able to do that versus another person, we would have to get into neurophysics, neuropsychology, neuroscience. I don't know. Someone's neurons fire better. Someone's got a more visual, a handful of the percentages, and I think I'm one of them, have different set of rods and cones, extra set, and they see more like a bee. It's vision. And they're able to see certain colors that other people can't even see.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a test you can take to kind of see, and it opens up this whole range, and if you can't see that way, you won't be able to see the colors in that range, and if you can, then you're able to see that way. But it's like 25% or some small percentage of humans actually have that kind of vision. That would be incredibly helpful for color, right? So if you possess that, and someone else doesn't, that person can't buy a bunch of rods and cones yet. They're not going to be able to really adjust that. Not yet. So, but they're going to be less able to learn color as fast as that other person, right? So there's a lot of things we have to kind of not compare ourselves to other people, but simply own our own strengths, because you're going to have some gifts that are unique to you. You're going to have something that you can parlay. And again, if we're just talking about longevity, or we're talking about leaving a mark in the history of mankind for the best painter that's ever lived, or if we're just trying to eke out a living and have a little bit more panache and fun doing it, and there's a lot of things that we're going to have to think about is what's the motivating factor for the drive, for the intensity, for the wherewithal, the focus. That needs to come into play too. So I think one thing that I could advise most people is really sit down with yourself and write out your intentions for doing it. What is your intention for being an artist? What is it you're trying to accomplish? Why is it that you're trying to do it? Really? I mean, what is the motivation? Where is it coming from? Try to really figure that out, and figure out then a game plan for what it is you want to accomplish. Where do you want to end up 5 years from now? Where do you want to be? What was your ideal scene look like? What would it be if you could have any kind of career in art, anything that you could produce? What would it look like? What would it be? What genre would it be in? What career would it take place in? And really sit and have a heart-to-heart with yourself and figure that stuff out.
Goal setting.
Yeah, and then train.
Yeah.
Train with a reason, train with an impetus. Now that impetus may change, and you have the right to change it at any time. Whatever got you through the front door of our school and got you here to try to learn, I'm thankful for. But whether or not you actually fulfill that, or that's just what got you in the door and got you motivated, that's enough right there. I wanted to be an animator, learned how to paint, now I want to be a painter. Animation, still dig it, but I really want to be a painter now. That's great. Animation got you in the door. Now you're going to be a painter. I've seen that a lot of times. So it's really all kosher, but I do want people to think about that stuff, think about why you're doing it. Think about what motivates you. And I think a lot of people just kind of don't know why they even do it. They're just doing it and going through the motions and wondering why they're kind of burnt out, or they don't really know where they're, it's like, give some thought to it, for God's sakes. So I'm always trying to get people to goal set, to write down those goals, to really start to focus on their vision, their intention. And every time they come into a class, I'll say, what is your intention for Quick Sketch today? And I'm hoping they don't just look at me like becoiled and dumbfounded. But, oh yeah, okay, I see the model, very curvy. It's going to be Bridgman, emphasis on distribution of weight. I'm going to be working on my abstraction. I'm going to be working more painterly. I'm going to work on vignettes. I'm taking torso with Eric. I'm just going to be working on pages of torsos because I want to reaffirm what I'm learning in anatomy and I want to become more intuitive with it. Okay, that's a good intention. Excellent. All those are doing good intentions, right? But not looking at you like, huh? I'm going to do what? We're going to draw little fast figures today for no reason. And if you do come in only for that and you don't have an intention, the intention could be simply to improve your dexterity. I'm just going to do a bunch of hard drawings so my dexterity gets a little better because I really don't have the bandwidth to really set an intention that's too complex today because I went out partying all night and I'm tired. Or whatever, or I just am burnt out from a hard week. Well, okay, you're still here and your intention is to get better dexterity. Don't expect a lot of retention and just go through the motion and get your hand a little bit better, but don't expect to remember a lot and get a lot of momentum on your intuitive level of knowledge.
Having an intention in your studies is really pretty powerful.
It is, and I think far too many people don't do that. They just kind of go through the motions. They don't have a big enough why as to what's motivating them to even be in class or whatever. And so when they get there, sometimes, the school can help because of all of us having such strong, or I've instilled that in a lot of the more mature teachers at our school, this ability to have foresight with where they're heading, which has helped them to design their careers, to design their lives the way they want to. Since we all do it, we talk about it fairly regularly, and I think a lot of people start to get clued into it because they're watching Eric do it or me do it or things like that, or talk about it, and then they start to inherently do it, and it starts to help them to direct their energies through the school more intelligently, so they're not just here aimlessly spending a couple of years trying to get sea legs with just how the thing even works, but hit the ground running with some intention right off the bat, and then work that into a dynamic future for oneself,
We got another question here. What do you think of the Valerie L. Winslow anatomy books? Are they good for learning anatomy? Have you heard of her?
No, I have not.
No, I haven't either. I thought you might know.
So that would be difficult for me to comment on, but I think
Maybe some good sources to learn.
yeah, it'd be nice to look them up and see. I really always appreciate when people bring to my my vision or my awareness something I'm not familiar with, because there's a lot of gems out there I'm sure I don't know anything about. But I think there's a lot of good sources. I'm working on an anatomy book right now. I think it's going to be a real pivotal one for Bridgman. I know that's a book that I herald as such a great book, but I just it's so cryptically put together that it's very difficult for anyone to really get the full gist of it and the full value out of it the way it's presently structured. So that's a good one. I think Sarah Siblett's good. I think John Raines is good. I think Robert Beverly Hale is awesome. I think Elliot Goldfinger for technical is really good. I think Hampton's really great for kind of dumbing down basic principles. I mean, so yeah, there's a lot of good anatomy. Those are just some that come to mind. Bridgman, a little bit of Loomis, not a lot. Some Vanderpool's pretty good too. My God, and then there's applying people like Frazetta, where you're actually applying what he did with Bridgman's knowledge and put it into a more dynamic, painterly environment, and actually did it better than Bridgman, in my opinion. Took the concepts and ran with them the way they should have been run with, but again, that takes a lot of deciphering, because Frazetta is pretty cryptic as well with his way of designing and how he does what he does. So that's another person you got to kind of dig into and figure out, which we will also do on the Bridgman book. So that'll be cool.
What is your training formula for a beginner artist? What order to train the fundamentals and how much time to spend on each? How much life drawing versus photo reference versus imagination drawings?
My God.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that one's, yeah, let me answer that one in a couple years. You know, the fundamentals are often overlooked. It's hard to find good fundamental schools or good fundamental classes because most people that are capable of teaching them would rather teach something more advanced, like myself. So guys like Brian in our program are really a wonderful asset because he has a real love and propensity for fundamentals. And I do too in my own way, but I'm just way past the years when I was doing it a lot. So it's more difficult for me to switch gears into it a little bit. I would say when you're first starting, obviously a lot of you aren't going to have access to great schools with live models. So you'll probably have to work more from photos, which I think there's nothing fundamentally wrong with. I do think there's a depth of knowledge that's gained from three-dimensional objects being observed, brought back down to a two-dimensional surface, and then fleshed out that way, which is obviously working from live models, that creates some way of seeing that's a little more astute, a little bit more posh and polished, but I don't think it's absolutely 100% necessary. Majority of my work's done from photos. I reflect a lot on my life work, so I think if you can have access to a life class, then by all means, I would say get in there as much as you possibly can, and also work your homework from photos at home. So you're working a combination of both different angles. They both offered certain benefits and certain perks that the other one doesn't. And so I would say the percentage is hard. I would always say that when people came into my our classes in our school, I would say 70% drawing, 30% painting. And of the 70% drawing, I would say the first couple years would be repeating certain classes, like you might take fundamentals head, fundamentals figure, and fundamentals quick sketch twice each, which would be once a semester. So maybe, and they usually skip semesters. So in 1 year, you would take both of those classes twice, and then you'd probably be done with that. And then you'd be into 20-minute lay-ins, which you would probably take a total of 8 to 10 times over 4 or 5 years to get good at head drawing and figure drawing. And you would also take straight figure drawing and head drawing about 10 times as well. And that would be once, if you took it once a term, there's 4 terms in a year, that would be 2 years of fundamentals before you're pretty proficient at it. Probably another year or 2 if you want to master it and get things on the wall and get drawings to the caliber of the wall drawings that we have at our school. So you're probably 3 years in before you're getting drawings of that caliber, maybe 4. You might be able to do it a little faster depending on who you are, how much you're taking, how much you're studying.
So if somebody's maybe a new student and trying to just get into drawing, it's going to be a lot of those constructive head type drawings that Brian's doing, a lot of constructive figures.
Yeah.
Learning, things like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, mostly learning the vernacular, learning edges, learning shape, learning to knit shapes together, learning to control your hand, learning to get your hand and your eye to work together without arguing as much, developing your dexterity, developing your aesthetic for what good even is, learning to see that from other efforts other more advanced students are doing, learning to ramp through anatomy systematically. So you would be going through anatomical training regularly and always have your hand in some sort of anatomy. The way we've structured it is we have about 4 to 5 classes that rotate through. Every time a year, you'll have torso, front, back, you'll have arms and legs, you'll have bridgemen, you'll have features and facial expressions, hands and feet, and you would spend 3 months donating some time to those studies every year, and you'd probably cycle through each one of those classes again 2 to 3 times over 3 years, taking them and then adding life drawings and other quick sketches and things like that to help solidify what you've learned in the academic of it. And then you would be ingraining the academia for the first 1 or 2 times. 3rd time, you're starting to become more intuitive. Maybe 4th time, you're really becoming intuitive. Then you're ready to start really diving into heavy figure invention. Then you're starting to reflect on the academia you've learned, as well as the experience of drawing from live models, what they can do, what they can't do, what different body types do. And then you start to manipulate those from reference, making the reference different into different body types, inventing, slowly becoming good at invention, because you have to be intuitive with your anatomy in order to be able to invent well. There's no way to invent what you don't know. So if you don't know a lot about anatomy and you go to a blank piece of paper, good luck. Not a lot good's going to be happening. So, and I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean it is what it is. So, yeah, I just ran through a lot.
Yeah.
I know I talk fast, but you guys, I'm trying to get as much bang for you guys. Well, no one's paying anything. So as much free bang for your buck as possible. Yeah, this guy's coming along pretty cool. He's just a nice little afternoon of inking. So this would be something like if I was just dinking around in my studio and I don't know, maybe I just saw the Dark Crystal, and we just watched it, my wife and I, on Netflix, the new one. And I don't know, it's cool. It's got its own little cheesy aspects to it, because of the animation and stuff. But I might be hot on it, and I might say, I just want to do some practice in inking, and this would be like a little sketchbook, doodle night. I might make a whole page of it. I might do some little heads up here and some figures down here, and make a nice little montage page of it, just for the heck of it, just for fun.
Would you typically do brush inking in your sketchbook?
Not so much in my sketchbook. Usually it's ballpoint pen in my sketchbook. I usually, when I do quill or I do brush, I go to a nicer Bristol like this, and I usually do it on a larger format sheet, or that's just the way I like to do it. You could do it theoretically if you had a stiff enough sketchbook, one that could handle water washes and a little bit the ink in that way. Most will. If you have a good sturdy one. So yeah, you could, but I don't normally. I need a little bigger surface to move my hand around on than a little sketch pad where I'm, dinking around in some little tiny space. So I'm just making up these greebles on this embroidery, and just like if I was making up paisleys or something or some kind of texture, I would just be adding little dashes here and little cut lines here and little swirls and little design elements that look like I'm designing some real intricate motif, and it's really just a bunch of made up greebles,
Guys like Gibson were so good at that.
Oh yeah,
we
Jesus.
have the inspirational inkers on Gibson, dropping in a few days, and so some of those guys online will see, but just so good at the expressions and indication of everything.
Yeah, his caricature of getting people's emotions and subtle emotions, discontent, just really cool, subtle. Amazing what that guy was able to capture. I have nothing but praise for him. What a great hand, what a great inker, and very enjoyable to look at. Really funny as hell, man, when you look at his stories and stuff, and the stories he's telling with his inks. They're really funny. Okay, just kind of getting certain things to pop, putting a little darker ridge along these flaps of leather or whatever that are kind of like almost like shoulder pads again. And, again, just kind of turning around that corner, pulling either like that, like that, but they're fast, that's not, again, tentative, scared strokes. That's confident, relaxed, intentional, driven strokes. And that's what you want your inks to look like. You want to look like you were in the flow and that you were really giving it a relaxed effort, not like it was like pulling teeth. It shouldn't feel painful to look at your work. Like, oh God, that really looks like it was a lot of work to do that, man. That looks like that hurt. So I want it to, it's going to be hard to do, but I want it to look like it wasn't.
So somebody's asking, when should we expect to see your anatomy book? Will the drawings be a little more descriptive than Bridgman's?
Oh yeah, they'll be cleaned up, and the intention of it is to basically redraw the majority of his book. You need his book also because you'll be utilizing it for the text and for the, I didn't want to just put all the anatomical names into mine as well because I think it's just filler for most anatomy books is to put the verbiage in because it fills up a lot of space. I prefer to fill up the space with really quality drawings that you can copy and emulate so that you can get as much learning from the visuals in it than it's not a reading book. There's tips in it and there's videos to watch that go along with the drawings. So if you take the course online for like $40, you get 2 months to do it and you'll have access to 40 hours of video of me doing Bridgman and Bridgman type exercises.
$49 a month?
I think it's 49. Yeah, 49 a month for like a 2-month period. You know, you can buy it a la carte,
Yeah.
or you get it if you're on certain phases or certain. If you're like, you know, have the full package of taking painting, drawing, and everything, you'll get it with that. But basically, what I'm saying is you can use the book without the course, but it's not going to be as as beneficial because you won't have as much content and watch me do it as much. You'll get little snippets that are included, but it's like a shorthand version of the drawing. If you want to see me actually verbalize, talk through it, talk about what I like what I'm doing right now, then you'd want to go on and take the course. But it'll be chock full of interpretation drawings of Bridgman, cleaning up his, looking at Frazetta and being inspired by some of his pieces and then reinterpreting those using the concepts you're learning from Bridgman, and then taking a photo of an individual that looks like he could have walked right out of the Bridgman book and doing a drawing interpretation utilizing both Frazetta and Bridgman to help you do that drawing from a photo, which now you're designing your own calligraphy utilizing the calligraphy you're starting to learn. So you're learning design anatomy, not just intellectual anatomy, which I think is way more helpful, personally.
That's how you start to learn some of those aspects of design, like what you were talking
Exactly, yeah. You inch your way in through it through somebody who knows what they're doing, usually. And then you ultimately you hope that you trigger in that person an ability to do the same thing. But how that happens is kind of cryptic and difficult to, again, quantify. Like some of the concepts we were explaining, it's very difficult to say, this is when the light bulb's going to come on for somebody. It's impossible to tell you when that's going to happen. You just hope that you set up enough good classes, good information, good exercises that it's going to happen for them. And as long as it does, then you succeeded. How you got there doesn't matter. So for me, I'm less concerned about how I got someone to get the light bulb on as that I got it on. And however I get it on, good for me. I don't, that's how I look at it.
I think that's part of the struggle for some, maybe of the newer students too, or new people who are newer to learning art, is that it takes a little while sometimes for the light bulb to come on, maybe.
Yeah, and it comes on in different degrees, in different things at different times.
It's a process.
And there's a lot of light bulbs that need to come on, and it's not just drawing light bulbs, it's painting light bulbs, it's color light bulbs, it's perspective light bulbs, it's anatomy light bulbs, it's there's a lot of bulbs that are going to have to, be tripped. And the key is to get them to happen in somewhat of an efficient manner to where you're bringing up all of your areas of study simultaneously. So you're not hyper obsessing about any one of them at the detriment of a bunch of other ones, but you're rather, utilizing a variety of different modalities of learning to allow everything to be brought up very much like we were taught to bring a painting up in as a whole rather than through pieces. I would like you to bring up all your skill sets organically together rather than just one came up, oh, now another one. Because you want to work off of each of other ones and have them all work off of each other, creating almost like a scaffolding or a support network that each one of them supports each other one. And you're learning constantly new things about landscape through portrait and portrait through landscape. You're learning more intuitive color being outdoors that you can then put into your natural paintings of people, So all of them are kind of ultimately propping and supporting each other in their own ways. And that way you're constantly bringing everything up, and you prevent burnout also because you're doing so many different cool things. It's hard to get bored, tired, burn out when you're doing that. At least that is for me. And that's been one way that I've prevented burnout with such intense work, is that I love all the different things that I get to do, and I do them regularly so that I'm not burnt. If I feel like I'm starting to burn out on portrait, I just switch over and start doing more still life for a while, and wait for to get back into wanting to do more portrait. But if I was only ever doing portrait, I might burn out of it. I might find myself in a very burnout situation if that's all I was doing or all I could do. And so I'm really a bigger fan of cross training and really getting people to be very eclectic, but not fragmented. So there's an art to doing a lot of things, but not so many things that you get confused. So you have to do enough of something to have continuity and consistency, but not so much that you burn out. That's a balancing act, and that's a fine line, and that's something each person has to learn, that balancing act for themselves. I'm going to take another little break. I've got the tail left. I don't know how much time we have left. What time is it?
About 50 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll probably get this little...
4:09, so we can go for almost 2 hours.
Yeah, I might as well go through that tail and get it done. Okay.
Okay.
Do we have
don't know where our note went.
And I'll just, you can, if you want, ask some questions or.
Well, one thing that I was wondering, it was kind of from before, when you were talking about, what makes somebody
Exceptional?
no, what makes somebody interested to get into the arts in the first place? What was your reason for becoming an artist, and why did you decide to work so hard at it and try to pursue that as a something in your life?
Yeah, I think it was quite early on, but it was with my dad mostly. I mean, I think I really have a great relationship with my dad, and I think part of it was just wanting to be kind of like him. I thought, I didn't really set out to learn from him until quite a bit later, but I do remember just, getting to go draw at his studio when I was a young kid and being around creatives, because he was in a studio with about 6 other really exceptional illustrators. And they all shared rent in a big mansion, like this big Victorian house downtown San Diego. And I would go, and my mom would drop me off there and just go do errands or go run errands, and I would just sit around drawing and moving between their studios, looking at what they were doing and basically just playing around, but drawing Frazettas and, and I used to I kind of was just totally, they all just accepted me kind of because I was my dad's kid. And then so I just, I knew them all, and I got to see them do professional book covers, and some of them worked out of New York doing editorial work. Some of them did just straight illustration. So it was really fun. So I think for me, I had a propensity towards drawing. I was punished for it when I was really young in school and held back and shamed for it. So and then later a couple years later, I was rewarded for it. So I think that confused me a lot when I was really young. I was like 5, and it was like, punish you, reward you, punish you, reward you for my gift. And it really pissed me off. It caused me a lot. I just finally figured that out like this last couple years. But it drove me to excel in a lot of things. But it was bad teaching, really, is what it was. It was a teacher not telling my parents the truth about what was going on, me not knowing it was bad to draw because that's what I was wired to do, them not knowing what to do with me, so trying to get me to do all the things I wasn't good at, which made me embarrassed, because I had, some learning challenges when I was younger. And so there was a lot of, I think it's affected my art on a lot of levels, and for me it's just unraveling that Gordian knot that is part of my curriculum or whatever, but it's like looking at it and going, how did that really affect me? It gave me incredible drive, so I'm happy for that. It made me into an incredibly driven person. I'm happy for that. A lot of good came out of it. But when I look at like the trajectory it pushed me into, it was this incredibly maniacally driven personality that I don't necessarily like entirely. I've gotten it to benefit me, which is cool. I parlayed it, I hacked it, I figured it out, but it's not how I want to create under that kind of energy. So for me, it's been a bit of a challenge trying to redirect my impetus towards why I do my art into a more, just a more evolved sense of purpose with it. And the teaching has worked really well because I find it to be a very helpful thing for lots of people, including myself. So it's very heartfelt. It's driven by a very good intention. Karmically, I feel like it's a very good thing to be doing. I feel like there's a lot of good in it. So for me, it's always been a huge part of my life. So is athletics. Athletics is an art that I value greatly. As I get older, it's harder to continue doing it to the level that I'm used to. So for me, art is way more receptive to longevity. So I'm kind of thankful for that as well. But what got me into it really was, I think it was ordained. It was just who I am. How I came about getting into it was a little bit through that competitiveness of wanting to prove everyone wrong, that I was not like broken or flawed. It was just a misconception put on me by a teacher that was ignorant. And then I had to unravel that myself, which made me a stronger person, and also made me value my uniqueness and my wiring to a higher degree. So I started to learn to champion myself for the uniqueness of who I am and also what I'm capable of doing, which has really led me to all kinds of cool, doing lots of cool things and being willing to, and also believing that I can. So I think, I was led to it at a very young age. It kind of came about in a strange manner, but I think it was kind of all meant to be. And in the long run, it did help me to become the person I am. So I have no regrets or anything. I just now I'm trying to figure out, I think as you get a little further in and you do realize that you're very much more uniquely wired than most, by observing friends and family and other things, you start to kind of realize, I don't really operate totally in the status quo. And I'm thankful for that because I don't want to. And I think it's beautiful to embrace your uniqueness as an individual and really champion it. And don't wait for someone else to champion it. But really own it and say, I am wired differently and it's freaking awesome because watch what I'm going to do with it. And go out and really create cool art, music, whatever with it. If no one ever stepped up to the plate and did that, man, it would be we would have nothing. Man, if nobody ever did, would. If no one ever went the route of being a great musician or had to go believe in themselves and try to go that route, or an actor, or anything in the arts. It's such a thankless thing in the beginning. It's so poo-pooed and freaking ostracized, and you really have to have a strong resolve just to get through those early years of people berating you. Usually the ones that love you most too, which is the most screwed up thing about it. It's the ones that really think they're doing you a favor by go get a real job, quit this nonsense with drawing, grow up, all that stuff. Where it's like, or teachers that do the same, because they're too narrow-minded to see that the whole world is designed by visual people. And driven by them, literally, that they can't put that together. They can't look at it that way and say, oh yeah, if you just kind of said, okay, what are you wearing right now? What are you driving? What did you go home to? What are you cooking your coffee in? What are you doing for entertainment this weekend? Oh yeah, you're going to see a concert? Oh yeah, and then you're going to go watch a movie. Well, who put those things together? Oh yeah, your kid's playing a video game? That's what you're going to get for Christmas? I mean, what? Dude, just go down the list of everything that you're doing that I design or guys like me design, So it's like I just want to yell at them. You guys, are you idiots or what? I mean,
the whole champion them more, then there's a greater opportunity for that person to do better in that field because there's such an abundance
of work and opportunity. It's just that they make you feel, because they teach it so poorly and they really don't know how to teach it, they basically just kind of poo-poo the whole thing and say, hey, we don't even know how to put a scaffolding around that thing. No, just go do math. Go do the regular stuff that we can teach you in, And it's like you just get left in the dust, to kind of fend for yourself. And unless you bump across a school like ours or get lucky and meet a guy like me or someone like that that's willing to really put it down in a way that is able to be learned from, and that you can start seeing where this could be a possibility of a really lucrative lifestyle. And not only that, but a really enjoyable one. God forbid that you actually have fun doing your living and actually have an incredible time in your career. We don't want that. So it's like, I just look at it and go, oh man, if I can just present it in such a way to help some people do that, what a cool thing to get to do on top of benefiting yourself by getting better, or whatever. So for me, it was such a win-win, or what I've learned to do. I never anticipated the school being my end game. I always thought it was just going to be a temporary thing that I did in between getting my real career going. And now I realize that the real thing is probably going to be the teaching, and the other thing is going to be the one that is actually not. It was just, I had it backwards. But I had not, for some reason, connected the dots on that. It took me the better part of 30 years almost to connect those dots. Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I'm gonna put down some paintings that are kick-ass, but just for myself. I mean, not for anybody other than me. But I won't not use my skill sets to the highest level I'm capable of. But I will also help other people get them to the level that I have, so that they can do what they want to do. and maybe some of them will be people that will become my teachers and my friends, and like it has in the past, and I can have some camaraderie on my journey with people that are like-minded, because it's kind of lonely out there by yourself doing this stuff. So it's nice to have a group of a tribe.
So what's fun about the school?
Yeah.
Like Evan and Andrew and
Oh yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
especially now because there's a new group of guys kind of all getting to know each other a little bit better and stuff.
Yeah, and it happens in groups like that. Like you saw the group that just left was like that 2 or 3 years ago. Some of them stuck it out. Some of them got really, really good. Some quit early. Some had to. But overall, when I look at the ones that stuck with it and the ones that went and did it kind of the way I thought was the way to do it, they're all going to kill it. They're going to do great. They're already starting to do great stuff. So it's fun to watch, but it's the changes of the guards. Every couple of years you got a new crop, and then some will stay, some won't, and some will really go the distance and some won't. And that'll just be determined on, financial factors, time factors, life factors, things that I have no control over whatsoever. So I just try to basically shepherd each group in and try to treat them all fairly and see which ones rise to the occasion, and just enjoy watching a new group come through and shepherd them as best I can.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
So somebody named Roman from the chat says, "Hi Jeff, just want to thank you for the online program. It helped me a lot. You rock."
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's really nice to hear positive things, because sometimes, again, like you're in this vacuum of your studio producing content, wondering if anybody's even going to care, because some of it's so obscurely complicated that you kind of think, am I just going to be shooting over everyone's head with this and no one's even going to want to freaking do it? Or is there anybody out there that is still interested? And I think I'm really happy to see that there are, and it's made me want to double down and really continue doing really cool content. We have such an amazing program. I wish more people would give it a shot and just see what it can do for them. But we'll see. There's been a lot, and there'll be a lot more, and I'm going to continue to produce good content. We'll see what happens.
Another person says, "Been an art teacher for 21 years. Been a student in the online program for 3 or 4. There's no better art training available. This is where it's at."
That is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Checks in the mail. Thank you. No. No,
Not to plug it.
no, that's awesome. I think it's really sweet. It's been a hell of a lot of work, I'll tell you that. So I'm always thankful to hear that it's being used and utilized by people the way I'd intended it, because it was way too much work just to put it out for the fun of it. It was. So I'm really happy to see people embracing it, enjoying it, excelling with it, and we've got some amazing people now in it. So you can see as I'm doing this tail, it's kind of just a cylinder with weird little greebles and stuff carved into it and around it. And I don't know whether it's almost like almost like an armadillo armor over the top of the tail. So it's hard to tell whether it's organic or it's something that is put on the tail to protect it, like a piece of not almost armor, or if it's just part of their actual organic way that they grow. But it looks almost like, to me, more like armor, but it has that kind of a turtle armadillo effect. It's cool looking, and it's nice design. So again, I really enjoy the design on these little guys. These mystics are kind of really cool, and I just love them. They were my favorites even when I was a kid, and I didn't even really realize, the whole good and evil thing as much. I wasn't really that enamored with, the yin and the yang, the fighting balances, all that kind of cool stuff. You do start to kind of, I just think it's cool. They always resonated with me. I always liked their demeanor. Thank God, I'm sure there's other people like the other crew as much. But, this could be reflected light, but it's too much. And again, I'm wrapping mostly in a cylindrical manner, like that, getting little striations. I can also go against some of these in certain areas along the core shadow, just to create the illusion of a little core running down the whole thing. As I go into these things disappearing down into like the shadow underneath, I have to ask myself, do I want to continue to do that, or do I want to come in at this angle, kind of like I did underneath the tail here, which created like a muka moray pattern, kind of twisting, turning, interlocking shapes that just take a very potentially dull area of shadow and turn it into something kind of fun and interesting looking. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It's not really following the form. It's just creating a interlocking pattern of cross-hatching that looks aesthetically cool for no other reason. Because otherwise, that's just an awful lot of nothing. And if I just put it in as a flat black, like a Frank Miller or a Mignola, you could do it, but it would be a different look.
Something I was going to ask is, I notice your inking style, at least that you have right now, is really not, it's not very similar to somebody like Doug's, who it's more like kind of doing little areas of flat black and then starting to feather it out, or like old school comics.
Yeah.
It's a little more like Frazetta. Or
yeah, mine's more like a fine art inking,
mm-hmm.
and his is more of a comic inking. Mm-hmm. And the two are kind of different. It's kind of like fine art and illustration, where one of them is a little more polished, a little more that image comic style, you know, like or the more mainstream. And this one's more, I guess I would just say unorthodox. I don't. I mean, if you look at, like, again, Solomon Kane, or you look at Prince Valiant with Gianni, he's going to be inking more like I am right now, probably. A little bit more in this kind of organic, old school style. Doug just has his own heroes, too, that are a little different, but he likes all the same people, and he's phenomenal at what he does. He's, you know, another really great example of someone who, when he was taking inking with me over the many years that he took it, and then the number of years that he taught it afterwards with me. I mean, it probably was 5 or 6 times that he took that class, you know, over 5 years. Because I usually would offer it once a year. Now I offer it like once every 2 or 3 years, usually, or 2 years or something, because it's just it's hard to keep your hand tuned in it. It's a difficult class to teach. Another reason why I wanted to put it in the actual online was to get it down before I had, so if I have to kind of jettison it at some point, I mean, not do it as much anymore, I don't have to feel this incredible pull to have to go warm up in it every time because it takes me a couple months to practice it, before the class starts, because I don't want to just come into a class and phone it in and do a shitty job, you know. So for me, it's like, oh man, I need my hand like in really good form, and of course I want it in the best form it's ever been in. I don't want it just okay, I want it phenomenal. And so then I get that pressure, and it doesn't make me very fun to live with. If you ask my wife, she'd be like, would you please drop the frickin' inking? None of this funny business.
It's almost over.
Get rid of this funny business. And you know, no, she's awesome. She's been my most incredible support for this whole thing, and I can't believe it, because a lot of times I just say, God bless her, man, because I'm not an easy guy to live with. No artists are, but it's okay. You know, we also bring a lot to the relationship that's cool. I mean, artists are incredibly, usually deep thinking, kind people is what I would most assess them as. You know, they want to do right. They're good people. They're fighting the good fight. They love beauty. They're trying to bring some beauty into the world. God bless them. But I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, that's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we could use a little bit more of that on the planet, personally, is people just bringing some beauty into it and just having some, you know, just really, really championing the beauty of the world and the aesthetics that we aspire to. I mean, I'm just blown away by the arts, and so thankful to be able to have chosen it, and also respected myself enough to follow through with it, and didn't take no for an answer. I would have done it no matter what kind of resistance I would have run into. I think it would have only propelled me forward more, and made me even more intense. So I'm gonna just see that little scaffolding. It kind of makes this look like a little kind of beveled piece of leather or wood, or, you know, it's got a kind of a fun feel to it, and that's something I see like Mark Schultz do a lot. Now I can go across here a little bit and feather in a little bit of a wedge there. I can skip a little there and pick up a little there, and again, it just creates this nice little reflected highlight running along whatever that fabric is. I might want to also wrap a little tone around that bottom toe just so that it rolls even a little bit more. Okay. Getting a little gassed out here. Almost done. Going to put a little diluted tone down into some of the hair to get like this to sit down in between these two. This one to pop on the other side of that. Let's put a little down in here and a little in there. Let's get a little bit down in there. And just start even adding another layer of believability to the illusion of his hair. And this is just choosing where to put the tone to give it the illusion of a believable shadow pattern. Passing over it. But I could put that down in here too. Like if I look at this and I say, oh, that pattern is number 1, too light, and number 2, too interesting. Which I kind of feel that way. I don't totally feel that way, but then I could just go and just knock down the whites in it. Still, you can still see that moire pattern, that cool pattern once you get in on it, but you're able to control laying down that area a little bit so it sits down and becomes more flat. But you still have used such a light ink on it that you can see all the cool brushwork that was done underneath it. So you're not really losing a lot out of it. You're just accentuating the fact that this cylinder should be rolling into shadow. And I'm using a little bit of a cheat to do it, which is to add tone, similar to painting, watercolor into it to give it extra volume and make it volumetrically more three-dimensional. I also could do that on the flat ground plane here, or I could leave it the way it is, but I could do it close to the foot and around the backside, and then as it goes further away, I could let some of it still stay, which creates the dissipation of that shadow as it passes out, almost like it's softening. Yeah. So I'm using just little optical cheats, to make the piece stronger. Like this could probably all benefit in there from a little bit of a glaze. And maybe this back foot. Of tone like that. And then that could help as well. So it's fun to play around with water stains with ink and combine linear ink with quill, with brush, with stains, with watercolor effects. But that's kind of my little demo for today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I hope you had a good Inktober. We've, for once in my life, got to celebrate Inktober in a I think we saved it all up for 1 year. Because man, every year I'd be like, I'm gonna hit it hard. I got nothing. Yeah. I just wouldn't do anything. And I've been inking freaking nonstop. Yeah, I mean, I've been busting butt on the inking train. So I really had a lot of fun. I always love revisiting that medium. I'll continue to probably play around with it, and it'll be part of my repertoire of discipline just to become a better oil painter. That's really my impetus behind doing it in the first place, is just to continue to get a more elite level of dexterity so that when I go to pull my Alla Prima one-time strokes in oil, I can do it with effortless dexterity and not have any fighting of the dexterity whatsoever. Then it's just my intention behind the stroke and then letting it ride and having the dexterity to know that it's going to pull well. So that's kind of what the inking does for me. It gives me another added level of superior dexterity to be able to wield in mediums that aren't quite as demanding. So it makes it feel easier. So again, thank you guys for your questions. Thanks for joining us. Continue to hopefully sign up for our YouTube and free content and all that kind of good stuff. And I know I hate, shamelessly promoting, but you got to do it these days. And I'm, and luckily I have 100% belief in what we do, and that if you do take the time to go online or whatever, you will not be disappointed, because the work is phenomenal. If you like what you're seeing us just doing these little quickies, it's that and 10 times better online with the workbooks and the depth of what we're able to do. So get on there, enjoy it, get good, and share it with the world. Love you guys. Thanks for being part of what we do, and hopefully I'll see you in person or on the online down the road. All the best. Cheers.